All right. So, um, so another thing that's been coming up recently in conversation is to do with interactions with other people, or relating to other people in a social sense, or relating to your peers, your family, relationship, professional. How would you say? I guess relationship, and how awakening changes this, and how with a few people I've been talking to, like a number of them actually, I've been talking about how it's pretty much like a gold mine for spiritual practice. And especially post awakening, what tends to happen is, and this is like pretty much universal, what tends to happen is that you'll be presented with opportunities to develop, let's say, or you'll be presented with the areas in which there's a holding or identification or a kind of stickiness in regards to identity, or the remaining structures of what makes up the separate self. And this is often something that is constructed due to past experience, emotion. People use the word trauma a lot. I noticed recently. Essentially, it's like a emotion work or relational work, or an outdated term that's used a lot in these circles is shadow work. But essentially, things would be easy if we were allowed to deepen this insight in our own company. But thankfully, we have ongoing opportunities to be confronted with the areas of ourselves that we are still holding onto in some deep kind of energetic or habitual, often emotional way. And when these things are presented to us, it reinforces the reality that awakening isn't an escape from our problems. It's the beginning of a process of integration of what's realised into our daily life, and that comes with its difficulties. But these difficulties are there precisely, as I said, as opportunities for us to uncover the deeper aspects of identity that we are holding on to. And often they just appear spontaneously. In hindsight, as we work through this kind of stuff, it seems quite perfect the way it played out, but there's a period of we are struggling a bit because the contrast of what's realised, the contrast of the awakening, the realisation, in comparison to the old habitual patterns of identified thinking and relating, of that old identity structure, the contrast is high, is obvious. And for myself, it got to the point where it started to become physically painful if I was to continue to engage in the old habitual identified patterns of relation and thinking and so on. It became physically painful. Like there would be physical symptoms. The price was obviously too high, but it kept happening. The triggers kept triggering the automatic identified circuit, and as that happened, every time that happened, things got a bit clearer. And as things got a bit clearer, it also became clear that there was the me that seemed to be doing this wasn't in control of it. So in that, it became even more singular, even more simple, and that all that has to be done, so to speak, which isn't really a doing, is just to deepen the insight. And it's always here, and it's always available. And in that, all of this takes care of itself. That sounds like a cop-out, but that's not as simple as it sounds. It's an embodiment now, orientation towards clarity now, that starts to become the most important thing that's here. And those old patterns of identified thinking, relation, how uncomfortable they are, stop being so important. And eventually they kind of dissolve into what's here, and they kind of do that in their own way, and it unfolds the way it does. So I'll describe my own experience with this a little bit. So post-awakening, something became very much more overt in experience, very obvious, and I started to feel this, or experience this, as the primary experience of relating to other people, and that was what they were feeling, or energetically, what the kind of energetics of the situation at a kind of resonant level was, that often, if not always, didn't have anything to do with the narrative or the relational context that was being spoken about or communicated at the conscious level. So with that disengagement from the narrative and the kind of getting in touch with, or coming into contact with that part of ourself that is below the narrative, that is more felt than cognized, the limits of separation between self and other thinned, myself and the world thinned, such that I felt everyone else's emotion as my own immediately. And that became a more prominent form of relation or communication, a more direct and a more authentic form than what was being talked about. The strange thing about that is it can be a seemingly disempowering place to be at a point, because it's also clear that what you're feeling. I talk about us inheriting a kind of responsibility, becoming aware of something that was always there but we were ignoring through our own assumptions of separation, and that's this felt emotional resonance. which is our own felt emotion, but that becomes our own felt emotion. Our own felt experience becomes that of the world. So you take it all on directly. But at the same time, it's obvious that there's nothing you can do about it. So at a point, it can kind of seem like a curse, because you've opened yourself up to something that you're bound to feel now, and you don't have a choice. But the more we, let's say, attune to or embody the more this realization deepens, it starts to become clear that the capacity of the individual is the only thing that's limited. What you actually are has an unlimited capacity for experience, and it always has done. So the thoughts and the assumptions that I can't handle this are completely untrue in the face of what's here, and that it's always been handled. You've always handled it. So the I can't handle this is bullshit. It's just bullshit. That starts to become very clear. And it opens up a different level of authenticity when it comes to interacting with others, because we're no longer pushing our own agenda. When we're consistently living in our own narrative, or colluding in a kind of disconnected, dissociated narratives of separation that end up not really making too much sense in the end, by their own view, by their own standards, you miss a lot and you ignore a lot. You're not really connecting with people in a way that is fully authentic. This is just my experience. So as what's here becomes the forefront of experience, the foreground, when you're communicating with another person, what's here becomes more obvious. And then there's a kind of allowance of space for that. So there's less of an urgency of, projecting out my own agenda or getting other people to understand my point of view. And it's easier to listen. It's easier to pick up on what's actually happening now, at a level that wasn't quite accessible to us before. And at risk of sounding weird, in a way, when we're familiar with this in ourselves after our awakening, we kind of gain access to, in a clear and obvious and immediate way, the delusion, the illusion, and it starts to become very obvious in other people. And that's what this whole pointing thing is, because we were getting tripped up by this very basic, very simple, constantly happening activity that we were actively overlooking what's already here. When you connect with what's here, you can, and you've recognized that in yourself as what was preventing this from recognizing itself, you from recognizing your true nature. That also becomes obvious in other people. But again, it's what's also obvious is that you can't do anything about it other than, like this channel is an attempt to talk about it. Other than that, there's nothing that can be done, because it's not up to me. It's not up to, it's happening the way it happens, and that's it. And it's clear that that's fine. So the agendas go out the window. And when the agendas go out the window, then there's a different level of communication that becomes accessible, directly accessible. And in that, there's empathy, but not empathy in the mind's sense, in the sense of the mind's idea of what empathy is, but direct empathy. So I was telling someone recently that people will start to, or they did for me, come and start telling you their problems, or kind of offload in an energetic or emotional sense in your presence, because there's a sense that there's a safety there to do that. There's a space there to do that, and naturally people will take advantage of that. You could see how it'd be very easy to form an identity from that, or you could see how it could be very easy to identify with that in a way that would cause you suffering. And that happens for a while. So as this deepens, then the infinite nature of this is embodied more and more, and with that, in this, the implications of that are an infinite capacity without resistance to experience whatever is here. And that means everything. That's not saying that functionally it's not appropriate to take a view and then use that for you to inform action. But that itself happens spontaneously without the need for this central character here constantly relating to experience and then deciding what to do about it from this vantage point. It just starts to happen spontaneously. You start to notice things. It's like you see in people's faces. You know, even pre-awakening, you see in people's faces the expression of pain, the expression of suffering. Like kicking about doing everyday stuff with a perpetual expression of absolute anguish, of absolute, existential torture presented for the world to see on the face. You start to feel that. You start to feel how pervasive that is. So then it becomes necessary to deepen this, because if you're going to hold somewhere, you're going to suffer more. But what this does is it opens up it puts you in contact with the suffering that's already here. And it's about you, but it's also about everything, because there isn't separation. So then there comes a point when it's like, I thought I was getting into this to get out. I thought I was getting into this as a form of disassociation or escapism, but it's like, no, you get more in contact with the pain. You take the pain on intentionally, head on. And it gets past the point of being courageous about it. I'm not saying that you need to be courageous as an element of that of course, but it passes the point of that, and it's just like what this is. It's like it's you've uncovered something, or you've dropped away something that was there for a reason, but you didn't know the reason it was there until you drop it, and then you're face to face with the pain, the suffering, the intensity of what this is, the sometimes terror, the mystery, the existential question mark that has been torturing you your whole life. you confront that head on, and by the time you get there, you're like, oh, I didn't, I didn't know that's what I was getting into. I didn't know that this self that I thought I wanted to get rid of was the disassociative framework that was making it seem like I could stay in here apart from this. You get face to face with it to the point where it becomes you, and you kind of can't hide anymore. There's nothing in this that you can hide after a certain point. It's out in the open. So and then it also simultaneously fills you with compassion, because you can see why these structures are insisted upon. You can see why we want to believe that, something that's clearly not possible to confirm an experience, because it gives us somewhat of a sense of security or detachment or apart from this. So we can, any of the uncomfortable aspects of this, whatever this is, we can hold it apart from ourselves and go, okay, I don't want that. After a certain point in awakening, you don't have that option anymore. that ship sails, and it's like, whatever this is, it is what it is, and it's not like you have to deal with it. It just is what it is, and the only thing is for it to be itself as it is. And the idea that could be resisted or controlled or changed, or deciphered from a vantage point in a way that gives us control, is just completely false, and that becomes clear. So then this is just lost in itself, as it always has been. I kind of went off topic on this, I think, but you see other people as yourself. That sounds stupid, but it's obvious. It's like other stops being a thing that makes sense after a point. And the implications of that aren't something that you can think about and then apply. The implications of that aren't even something you can understand. But it understands itself directly. And this is where we get to the point where if anyone's feeling into what I'm talking about, you might get a sense from where I'm talking here. You might get a sense of this deep, like, visceral pull of, the existential questions. They could be made into philosophical questions that this is addressing. That this transcends, so to speak, are so deep, are so unpalatable that the value in that is to see what's causing that to be suffering. What is causing that to be unpalatable in a way that it causes us to suffer, and what actually is it? What actually is it? Because it is what it is. It is what it is. So then if I was to describe this, there will be a number of people listening to this that will find this very off-putting and won't get what I'm talking about, and there will be a number of people that will. There's also going to be a pull there, and it will be a visceral pull, and it will be a defense of an identified function in thought, essentially, if you're interested in looking at it. But even the pain, even the suffering, even the horrors, even the most repugnant and abominable expressions of what this is. Can you say that you're apart from that? If this non-dual thing is what we're really interested in here, and this is where we're going, if we want an end to suffering, can you really say that you're apart from that? Can you really, honestly take a realistic position and say that you oppose that? How do you know? How do you know? How do you know that that's what's supposed to be? Can it be what it is? Can it be the way it's supposed to be? Is it other than that? And then what kind of response does that trigger here in the body? What kind of view is being insisted when you hear something like that? Is that how deep this goes? If we see something that we find to be like a manifestation of evil, then is it possible that that's you as well? Is that you? Is that what you are? If this non-dual thing goes all the way, then how can that be separate? How can that be separate? Then it becomes your responsibility as well. But not in the way that the mind thinks. It could be, but that's not what I'm talking about here. So this is all a good idea, like, you know, this is all pleasant and, you know, interesting concept, but when we really start getting into it, then it becomes something different. When we really start to see why we're motivated to explore the experience at the deepest level, then we really start to see why this separation is here in the first place. It starts to go pretty deep. It starts to go really deep. And it goes to places where you don't want to go. By definition, you don't want to go. But after a certain point, you have to. So I don't know if that was way off topic, but I'll need to go for now, and I'll talk to you next time.